Hello. Looks like I stopped reading chapter 1 with like 100 words left in it. I'm a fool. Here we go. Welcome to the George Daily Devotional, episode 8. We will finish this chapter 1, and then we will just jump right into chapter 2. Chapter 1 is about the insufficiency of the current theories about wages and where they originate from. Here we go. The conclusion. All this is clear when looked at in this way, but to meet this fallacy in all its strongholds and lurking places, we must change our investigation from the deductive to the inductive form. Let us now see. If, beginning with facts and tracing their relations, we arrive at the same conclusions as are thus obvious when, beginning with first principles, we trace their exemplification in complex facts. All right, chapter 2. We finished that one up. The meaning of the terms. All right, he who defines wins, they say. We continue. Before proceeding further in our inquiry, let us make sure of the meaning of our terms, for indistinctness in their use must inevitably produce ambiguity and indeterminateness in reasoning. Not only is it requisite in economic reasoning to give to such words as, quote, wealth, quote, capital, quote, rent, quote, wages, and the like, a much more definite sense than they bear in common discourse, but unfortunately even in political economy there is, as to some of those terms, no certain meaning assigned by common consent, different writers giving to the same term different meanings, and the same writers often using a term in different senses. Nothing can add to the force of what has been said by so many eminent authors as to the importance of clear and precise definitions, save the example, not an infrequent one, of the same authors falling into grave errors from the very cause they warned against. And nothing so shows the importance of language and thought as the spectacle of even acute thinkers basing important conclusions upon the use of the same word in varying senses. I shall endeavor to avoid these dangers. It will be my effort throughout, as any term becomes of importance, to state clearly what I mean by it, and to use it in that sense and in no other. Let me ask the reader to note and to bear in mind the definitions thus given, as otherwise I cannot hope to make myself properly understood. I shall not attempt to attach arbitrary meanings to words, or to coin terms, even when it would be convenient to do so, but shall conform to usage as closely as is possible, only endeavoring so to fix the meaning of words that they may clearly express thought. And he will use a lot of words to do so, as we might have noticed in that paragraph. We continue. What we have now on hand is to discover whether, as a matter of fact, wages are drawn from capital. As a preliminary, let us settle what we mean by wages and what we mean by capital. To the former word, a sufficiently definite meaning has been given by economic writers, but the ambiguities which have attached to the use of the latter in political economy will require a detailed examination. Quick note that the former there was referencing the definition of wages, and the latter, which will require a, quote, detailed examination, is the word capital. And this is a big deal. What is and is not capital? Here we go. I'm excited. As used in common discourse, quote, unquote, wages means a compensation paid to a hired person for his services, and we speak of one man, quote, working for wages, unquote, in contradistinction to another man who is, quote, working for himself, unquote. The use of the term is still further narrowed by the habit of applying it solely to compensation paid for manual labor. We do not speak of the wages of professional men, managers, or clerks, but of their fees, commissions, or salaries. Thus, the common meaning of the word wages is the compensation paid to a hired person for manual labor. But in political economy, the word wages has a much wider meaning and includes all returns for exertion. For, as political economists explain, the three agents or factors in production are land, labor and capital. And that part of the produce which goes to the second of these factors, labor, is by them styled wages. That's a big deal right there. That is land, labor, and capital. Land is distinct from labor and capital. Spoiler alert, when he defines capital, he says land is not capital. We continue. Thus, the term labor includes all human exertion in the production of... Quick side note. I don't know a lot of Marxist theory, but I'm pretty sure they just say there's labor and capital. If I'm wrong, let me know. I continue. Thus, the term labor includes all human exertion in the production of wealth, and wages, being that part of the produce which goes to labor, includes all reward for such exertion. There is, therefore, in the politico-economic sense of the term wages, no distinction as to the kind of labor or as to whether its reward is received through an employer or not. But wages means the return received for the exertion of labor as distinguished from the return received for the use of capital, and the return received by the landholder for the use of land. The man who, I guess, I'm going to reread that. But wages means the return received for the exertion of labor as distinguished from the return received for the use of capital. Right. We're distinguishing between the return to each of the... So there's the three factors of production: land, labor, capital. The return to labor is wages. The return to capital and the return to land are not wages. That's all this sentence is saying. I'll continue. The man who cultivates the soil for himself receives his wages in its produce, just as if he uses his own capital and owns his own land. He may also receive interest and rent. Right there you have the return to capital we call interest, and the return to land is called rent. We will continue. The hunter's wages are the game he kills. The fisherman's wages are the fish he takes. The gold washed out by the self-employing gold digger is as much his wages as the money paid to the hired coal miner by the purchaser of his labor. We have a footnote. This was recognized in common speech in California, where the placer miners styled their earnings their wages and spoke of making high wages or low wages according to the amount of gold taken out. Cool. And as Adam Smith shows, the high profits of retail storekeepers are in large part wages, being the recompense of their labor and not of their capital. In short, whatever is received as the result or reward of exertion is wages. This is all it is now necessary to note as to wages, but it is important to keep this in mind, for in the standard economic works, this sense of the term wages is recognized with greater or less clearness, only to be subsequently ignored. We're not going to ignore it, not like those other people who do standard economic works. I'll continue. But it is more difficult to clear away from the idea of capital the ambiguities that beset it, and to fix the scientific use of the term. In general discourse, all sorts of things that have a value or will yield a return are vaguely spoken of as capital, while economic writers vary so widely that the term can hardly be said to have a fixed meaning. Let us compare with each other the definitions of a few representative writers. Quote, that part of a man's stock, unquote, says Adam Smith in Book 2, Chapter 1. Quote, which he expects to afford him a revenue is called his capital. So the whole quote of Adam Smith together would be, that part of a man's stock which he expects to afford him a revenue is called his capital. So, yeah, that's Adam Smith's definition. And the capital of a country or society, he, Adam Smith, goes on to say, consists of 1. Machines and instruments of trade which facilitate and abridge labor. 2. buildings, not mere dwellings, but which may be considered instruments of trade, such as shops, farmhouses, etc. 3. Improvements of land which better fit it for tillage or culture. 4. The acquired and useful abilities of all the inhabitants. 5. Money. 6. Provisions in the hands of producers and dealers, from the sale of which they expect to derive a profit. 7. The material of or partially completed manufactured articles still in the hands of producers or dealers. 8. Completed articles still in the hands of producers or dealers. Those are Adam Smith's 8 forms of capital. Henry George continues, the first 4 of these be styles fixed capital, and the last 4 circulating capital, a distinction of which it is not necessary to our purpose to take any note. Oh, that was a further clarification of Adam Smith's breakdown. He's got 8 kinds of capital, 4 fixed and 4 circulating, but Henry George says we don't need to worry about which are fixed and which are circulating. We will now look at Ricardo's definition of capital. It is capital is that part of the wealth of a country which is employed in production and consists of food, clothing, tools, raw materials, machinery, etc., necessary to give effect to labor. This is from Ricardo's Principles of Political Economy, Chapter 5. Henry George continues, this definition, it will be seen, is very different from that of Adam Smith, as it includes many of the things which he includes, as acquired talents, articles of mere taste or luxury in the possession of producers or dealers, and includes some things he excludes, such as food, clothing, etc., in the possession of the consumer. Next we have McCulloch's definition, but I'm not going to tell you right now. I'm ending the daily devotional. If you want to hear what McCulloch says and what John Stuart Mill says and Professor Whalen says and Henry C. Carey says, you'll have to come back tomorrow. See you later. Go earn some wages.